Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we have the topic of Retreat Lock, and as you can see on the screen we do have quite a few options for Retreat Lock in the meta right now. If you watched any of the regionals this past weekend, you will notice that Yveltal has made its way into a lot of different decks. I think it's important to understand when you can expect to see these cards and how they kind of function in those decks to kind of understand how to play around it. Now, Retreat Lock has been in the game for a little while now. Most recent example I would say, aside from these cards, is going to be Snorlax with the ability Block. So it actually wasn't an attack, it was its ability that prevented you from retreating. Very powerful deck that basically just focused on locking you in place and making you run out of cards eventually. And we've kind of seen different uses of Retreat Lock. Sometimes it's a strategy to just outright try to win the game off of that. If you have no way to retreat, you can just lock something in place that's completely useless. And then other times we're kind of seeing it being used to just kind of buy you time. Most recently with the Mega Kangaskhan, Mega Absol deck, one of the kind of weaknesses of that deck is just being able to accelerate energy fast enough. And so a lot of times, pushing up a Yveltal and locking something into place for 2 to 3 turns will allow you enough time to basically build up your energies and set up the board that you need. I think each of these 3 retreat locking options here are very powerful for their own different reasons. We're kind of seeing them in different decks, and I'll kind of explain which decks you can find them in. But I do think that all 3 are very viable right now, depending on what deck they're being played in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I'll go ahead and talk about each of these 3 cards, where you can find them, and what they kind of are used for. So first up, we have Yveltal, which in my opinion right now is the strongest retreat locking option. It is the most recent to come out with the Mega Evolution set. It has the clutch attack for 20 damage, which costs 1 darkness energy, and during your opponent's next turn they cannot retreat. It does also have free retreat costs, which is very important. So that dark typing and that free retreat costs, that's what we're going to kind of get into onto why this card is playing so much. But right here you'll see kind of a list of results from the Milwaukee regionals here. This is just top 100 right here. You'll see that it's being played a lot. It's mostly being played in the new Mega Absol deck, also being played in Zoroark, and we're also seeing it in Grimmsnarl. Those are kind of the 3 main decks where we're seeing this card. So it's definitely a solid option in all 3 of those decks. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Right here you'll see I have Petron EX on the screen. The big reason for that is because it has the Subjugating Chains ability. So you're able to move a dark type Pokemon from your bench to the active spot, and if you do that you poison yourself. This is kind of a good thing, and it's kind of one of the things that makes Yveltal so strong, is because you have a way to basically intentionally damage yourself each turn. Because if you send this thing up from poison, you're going to do damage to yourself, each turn basically, throughout checkup, you're going to basically be doing 10 to 20 damage. And then you do typically play this with Monkey Dory, where you're able to move that damage onto your opponent's side of the board. So basically, it's just a really solid mobility option. Petron basically prevents you from getting retreat locked because you're switching out from the ability, you're not retreating. And it also allows you to get this Yveltal onto the active spot and basically intentionally poison yourself to, do that extra damage each turn. You do also have the free retreat cost, like I mentioned earlier. All the other retreat lock Pokemon have some kind of retreat cost, so having no retreat cost can be very good. Especially in Absol, which I'll kind of talk about right here. This right here is like kind of a typical board state you might see if you're playing Mega Absol, Mega Kangaskhan here. And so basically, if you're kind of leaning into that retreat lock strategy, you're gonna move, Yveltal into the active spot with Petron. You're gonna poison yourself. You're doing 20 damage each turn with Clutch, and then you take 10 damage during your turn and during your opponent's turn, so a total of 20 damage to yourself with that poison damage. You can use Monkey Dory to move that over to your opponent's side of the board. So you have a lot of options to kind of move damage around. The other cool thing with this card, especially in this deck, is that you have that mobility option since there is no retreat cost. So a lot of times Yveltal is kind of just there as a pivot option. You can basically move it into the active with Petron, and then you can hard retreat into something else like Kangaskhan to be able to draw cards. You play the Penny in this deck, so you can retreat into Kangaskhan, draw 2 cards, you could Penny it up, and then switch into something else. So you have that really nice mobility option, which is what makes the card so good in this deck. You have the mobility option, you have the ability to retreat lock to basically buy you some time. Against certain decks, you can just outright win because they have no options if they get retreat locked. And again, you can poison yourself with the Petron and move that damage with Monkey Dory. So that's really why you see Yveltal being played in this deck. And of course, you already play Dark Energy because you have Absol, so it just kind of makes sense. Same thing with Zoroark here. It's pretty much the exact same thing. You play the Monkey Dories, you already play Dark Energy. You have the option to move it into the active spot with Petron. So it's pretty much the exact same reason as we're seeing it played in Absol. For both of these, as you can see, I just changed the cards on the right based on what you're playing. But yeah, pretty much the strategy here is you're playing Dark Energy, you have free retreats, You have the ability to poison yourself, and you have the ability to move that damage with Monkey Dory, so that's pretty much why you're seeing Yveltal in these two decks. The other deck that we're seeing being played in mostly is Grimmsnarl. So with this one, we don't really play the Petulant. And a lot of times with Grimmsnarl, we'll see either this or the Maractus, which I'll talk about later. But with this one, we do have the ability to kind of damage our side of the board with Freezing Shroud, with Frostless's ability here. So again, that's another way we can retreat lock, intentionally do damage to ourselves, and then move it onto our opponent's side of the board with Monkey Dory. So instead of poisoning ourselves, we do have Frostless, which will damage our Monkey Dories, and then we can move that damage over to our opponent. So same kind of thing here. Dark Pokemon, we already played the Dark Energy, has a free retreat cost, which is always nice. So again, just a great option to kind of throw into the deck because, you know, in some matchups, you just outright win. Like if they don't play Turo, if they don't play any switch cards, they have no way to switch out and they don't really expect it, then you can just outright win games like that. Next card I want to talk about here is Sudowoodo, which is a fighting type Pokemon with Impound. So same thing, 20 damage, your opponent cannot retreat. This one does have the 1 energy retreat cost, and we're pretty much seeing this card in mostly control types of decks. So Pidgeot control, we're seeing it in Crustle, we're also kind of seeing it in, you know, straight Dragapult as well. Kind of more of those control-y types of builds of Dragapult that we've seen. So it's pretty much the 3 types of decks that we're seeing it in. We're not really seeing it anywhere else. It does cost a fighting energy, so again, not every kind of deck plays fighting energy. With a deck like Dragapult, you're already playing Luminous, so it kind of just works. And same with like stuff like Pidgeot, you know, you can kind of just splash it in. And there's a big reason why we use this card in certain decks. And pretty much the only reason why we go for Sudowoodo over some of these other cards is because of resistance. So pretty much with these decks here, especially Crustle, for example, your matchup against Gardevoir is atrocious. Like it's terrible. Like I think I was looking at the Milwaukee matchup breakdown. I don't remember what the percentage was. I think it was like under 20% of Crustles that beat Gardevoirs. So it's a horrible matchup, right? Because Gardevoir has so many rings around Crustle. But one of the things you can do is if they aren't careful with their energies, or like they kind of overextend and kind of attach energies early and they don't have a way to like attach more energies, you can basically bring up one of these psychic type Pokemon and just kind of win the game off of that, because they do have a resistance of -30 for fighting type Pokemon, which means that you can retreat lock them and you're doing no damage to them. So a lot of those decks play Monkey Dory and stuff like that, where they're able to move damage over to your side. With that Impound doing no damage, you're basically locking them into place and saying, hey, you cannot play the game anymore, you can't do damage to me, you have no way out of this. So it basically just kind of gives you a win condition against some of these decks where you pretty much had no chance to begin with, but with the Sudowoodo, if they overextend, you can pretty much have a chance to win the game, which is really nice. Gardevoir used to kind of play Professor Turo's scenario to, you know, go ahead and pick it up, which we have not been seeing lately. Based on all the retreat lock stuff that's been happening, I would not be surprised if they start to add it in again. So that is one thing to kind of watch out for. But again, this card is specifically in these types of decks that really hardcore lose to Gardevoir, just to kind of give you a win condition in a matchup where you otherwise probably wouldn't win. And the last retreat lock Pokemon I want to talk about here is Maractus, kind of the OG here, I would say, from the Journey Together set. A card that we've seen in Grimmsnarl, we've seen it in Dragapult. Those are kind of the 2 main decks. Same thing, it has Corner, 20 damage, your opponent cannot retreat, but it does have the Exploding Needles ability. This Pokemon is knocked out in the active spots by an attack from your opponents. You're able to put 6 damage counters on that attacking Pokemon. So kind of a good way to just do some extra damage, which can be really nice for certain decks. It does have a 2 retreat cost, which is kind of tough, but we do have Air Balloon in some decks, so it's really not that bad. Kind of just depends on what deck you're running. And so like I mentioned earlier, Grimmsnarl right now is kind of running a mixture of either Yveltal or Maractus. The reason to kind of play Maractus over Yveltal would be if you want to kind of do some more damage, I guess. You're basically able to kind of do more damage on your side of the board because you're taking damage from Freezing Shroud on the Maractus. So it can be a great way to kind of just build your damage up faster and kind of close out games like that. So I think with this option, I feel like with Grimmsnarl or really any of these kind of cards, if you're kind of going for like a hardcore retreat lock strategy where you're trying to win the game off of that, you know, you kind of get to a position to where there's nothing your opponent can do, so it kind of just makes sense to run the Maractus at that point. I think the Yveltal is a little bit more like flexible, kind of is like a nice pivot option like I mentioned, so it can kind of be a good option for that. But if you want to just build up damage faster, I definitely think Maractus is kind of the route to go. For Dragapult specifically, it's definitely a good card because you're basically retreat locking, and if they do manage to knock this out, you're basically adding extra damage. So one, I guess, matchup where I could really see it being used for would be something like Raging Bolt, for example. You could even just retreat lock like a Raging Bolt itself and kind of force them to knock out this Maractus, and they're going to take that 60 damage, and now they're within range of Phantom Dive, and they've only knocked out a 1 prize Pokemon, so you can kind of take that prize card race. So I do think that the Maractus is really good in Dragapult just because you're going for that spread damage. You're kind of hitting some awkward numbers at times where you just need a little bit more damage, and I think the Exploding Needles can kind of get you over the hump there and kind of just put Pokemon in range for knockout. So I do think it's a really solid option for Dragapult in general. But that's kind of why we see it in those 2 decks specifically. That's pretty much just a quick overview of these cards and what decks to kind of watch out for. So if you play against any of those decks on ladder or in person or anything like that, just kind of be on the lookout for these cards. The ways to combat this is, I guess, to just not put any liabilities in play. Like if you know your opponent has that retreat lock option, you don't want to bench stuff that can get stuck and just be useless, you know what I mean? Even when you bench stuff like Fezandipity EX, for example, like you can still technically attack with Cruel Arrow, so it kind of makes retreat locking a little bit more awkward. But whenever you play other decks where like the Pokemon cannot attack whatsoever, like Latios for example, it's just a hardcore liability and you can just lose the game outright. So I do think it's important to kind of understand when this is an option for your opponent, because we kind of saw it on stream too, right? Like there were times where you know, Kangaskhan players were just going through the motions, doing all the things, and then halfway through the game it said, hey, I'm just going to retreat lock you, and there's nothing you can do. So it's always a solid option that you have to kind of watch out for, and these are kind of just the decks where it's really popular right now, and I kind of expect to see more play with the retreat locking strategy. Go ahead and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you guys want me to cover right now with the metagame. I know retreat lock was a big topic from this past weekend, so I kind of wanted to give my thoughts on it a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot going on right now. Mega Evolution format feels really fresh. I'm excited to keep testing for the Vegas regionals coming up soon. I'll be going to that in about a month, so kind of trying to lock in my deck right now. But yeah, if you guys have anything else you want me to talk about right now with the meta, just go ahead and let me know in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.